We will begin with Freda Huson, appointed by Unistoten Chiefs as their spokesperson. She lives at Unistoten Community Camp, which is 66 kilometers south of Houston, BC. Her clan is protecting their land from fracking and oil pipelines. They are doing this with an ongoing checkpoint that requires all industry and guests to pass free, prior, and informed consent protocol before entering their territory. Freda, mic is yours.
First of all, I'm just thankful to have been welcome on these territories. Anywhere I go, I always make sure that I'm welcomed by the Indigenous people, because through our protocols, we're not allowed to go into other people's territory and speak on other people's territory unless we've been welcomed. So thank you. And thank you for all the people that are here to listen, and the people in New Brunswick, because all the things that we're fighting for, it's impacting everybody, not just us. And it shouldn't be totally relied upon just our people to fight this fight, because we've been fighting this fight for 100 years and we're still in the same place we were years ago. Things haven't changed. We haven't seen no change. And the only way I see that there will be change is people coming collectively together to make that change. We can't keep saying we're protecting the environment, yet continue to buy products that are going to end up in a landfill nonstop. We can't continue to say we're protecting the environment when we all drive vehicles to and from work every day. And we can't keep saying we're protecting the environment when we're buying in to this structure that is not working. We all vote every year, and the government, no matter which one is in, is only there for itself. To me, I say that system is the 1% elite are the ones that run this country. And that 1% elite are the ones that are greedy and don't care about our environment. And our people are way at the bottom. Even though these are our lands, our voices aren't heard, we aren't listened to, and yet our governance structure protected the lands. We only took what we need, and we always gave back and took care of it, because the land takes care of us, so we take care of the land. And my family, probably over 10 years ago, my generation were sitting around, because every time we went to our territory, there was less and less and less. It was all being destroyed. And probably about 8 years ago, we heard there were going to be pipelines coming through our territory. And we only had 2 territories that were actually listed in our name, because we had lost other territories through what in our language we call negadeldes, where father's children were using the territory, and when father died, the children kept using the territories, then pretty soon they started claiming our territories. Even though we know it's still ours, we still have that. So we have said we only, according to what they say, we only had 2 territories. And one was going to at risk from mining, and the other was at risk from the pipelines. And my generation said, we can't continue to sit back and be silent no more. We didn't feel like we had a voice, then we just started making our voice known to our chiefs and said, we need to do something. We can't continue to sit here and allow our lands to be decimated. So our chiefs finally said, well, you guys are the educated ones. You go ahead and do what you need to do, and we will support you. Because we kept saying, we don't want to be telling the stories. And what really got me to, like, I was just one of the people that were sitting on the fence too and just watching what was happening, because I worked in a job for 14 years and worked in economic development, and realized after a while when I went to visit other communities, I went up to Fort Nelson and saw how bad the air was there, and just listened to Togasai tell the story about what his experience was from visiting where the tar sands are. I can't remember the community, Fort McMurray, of how decimated their lands were. And then I met some people that lived there. When I attend events like this, we're speaking on the same panel and listening to their stories, talking about how they used to have moose, how they used to have fish, how they can't practice their culture no more. And that really, really shook me to realize that I don't want to be telling that story to my grandchildren, that what we used to have. We really need to do something. So about 6 years ago, we started a camp, which is called Huson Camp. And we call it the action camp, because we wanted to learn how to do nonviolent direct action, where we could do things peacefully and protect our land, because our people have never done that. And because we were forced onto reservations, a lot of our people don't have the means to go to the territory, but my family always consistently went to our territories, so I knew where my territories were and why I was so connected to it culturally. But a lot of people don't have that opportunity because they're poor, they don't have any modes of transportation, so they can't go to their territories, and they don't know where their territories are. So we were running these camps to make more connections, because people from all over the world were coming to the camps where they would share their stories, what they were doing to protect their lands, what they were doing to protect the environment. And by sharing our stories with each other, we were able to create a large network of people. Because without all these people, we wouldn't be saying we've been having results. Because to me, we ourselves, standing by ourselves, would not have been able to do it. We have a lot of different organizations to give thanks for, and there was a lot of financial contributions, and we had people that were expert at fundraising who were off 20 years in doing environmental protection that were able to come on board with us and help us in that area, because I'm not a good fundraiser. I don't know how to do that. And I'm so thankful for the Victoria Force Action Network, who came on stream with us probably about 4 years ago and has been helping us bring groups of people up to the camp for our action camp, and has been doing a very good fundraising campaign to bring funds to help us, because it takes money to feed the people. Because if we were just living there by ourselves, we could sustain ourselves. But when you have like 100 to 200 people coming for a camp, we're unable to feed them from what we get off the land. So it was very helpful. And the thing that I've been identifying is the more people that you have on board that are having a voice out there against the government and industry, who are hand in hand battling against us, and they have billions of dollars in their budget to fight against us, and we have zero. And yet, over and over, our people have to challenge industry and government in courts, and no matter how many court cases are won, our people still have to prove ourselves through their court systems and spend thousands. Sometimes it's 500,000, sometimes it's 1 million just for one court case. And that basically will sap up all our resources we have to try and reoccupy our lands. And I'm pretty sure government and industry know that, so that's why they continue to do that. They continue to expect us to prove over and over that these are our lands, even though we know these are our lands. And yet they have yet to prove to us how they think they own our lands. Because we've never ceded it, we never surrendered it, we never lost it to war. And we keep challenging them with that. You need to prove to us why you think you own our lands. And they've done a horrible job of managing the resources. They've overexploited it and ruined many of the industries that have come and gone because they've overexploited it, and they're doing it again. And until people in general recognize that and recognize this is a flawed system and this economic wheel is going to collapse in on itself, everybody's going to struggle. And it will, because when you overexploit, eventually it's going to cave in on itself. And right now they are overexploiting in the oil and gas industry, and it's already at its tail end. So if people don't know how to grow your own food, you don't know how to self-sustain, if you're totally dependent on that grocery store shelves, you're going to be the first to go because you're going to starve. You're going to run out of water. And the reason why I bring up water is because my suspicion is that because there is no money to be made in frack gas or oil, and yet they're still fighting so hard to put those pipelines through. And I can't remember what the name of that Water Act is that they're trying to pass by 2016. I strongly believe that they're after our water, because right now China is probably lost 80% of their water, and that's because they polluted all their waters from industry. And they're now piping the size of the gas and oil pipelines we have here. They're piping water from south to north. And to me, my belief is that they're pushing for these pipelines. I easily believe that they could pump the water from our area through these pipes to Kitimat onto these tankers and bring it to China. That's what my suspicion is. Because water right now, we pay $4 a liter. That's way more than gas and oil. So that is our most valuable resource here. And I strongly believe that is what they're after, is our water. And the reason why I got that suspicion, because I recently got a letter from the Oil and Gas Commission to my clan. And again, they say they're consulting, but they never ever, we respond by their timeline saying that, no, we don't approve of this permit. They still issue permits anyways. And that last letter that we got said that they were issuing a permit to re-divert water. So when they're re-diverting water, that's usually either for damming or they want to do something else with the water. So that's when I started to question, thinking, if there's nothing to be made in the oil and gas right now, why are they still fighting so hard to put those pipes in? I really believe they're after our water now. And without that water, our salmon will be impacted. And if you impact the salmon, you impact our bears, you impact us, because we basically eat salmon as our staple food. And people need to wake up, because we can't continue to sit back and say, what can we do? It's the government. They make all the legislation. They make all the rules. And the thing about that Water Act, it's oil and gas are exempt from it. They don't have to pay. But everybody else has to pay. And the federal and provincial don't have to pay. So what does that tell you? And they want to implement that by 2016. And it's paid by the volumes of how much volume they use. And yet they use a lot of volume, and yet the agriculturists will have to pay for how much volumes they use, but the oil and gas are going to be exempt from it. So what does that tell you? If you're interested, look it up. That's where I found it, was online, because I was curious about it, because I found out about that Water Act last week when Caleb had come up to do his presentation to the chiefs in Smithers. He told us to research that we should know about it. So I looked it up and I said, wow, that just reconfirms what my suspicion was a week prior, that they're after our water. Because they're going to make money off of that if they're going to be charging people by the volume how much they take. So we have a lot that's going to change if they pass that Water Act, because even right now they tried to tell us that our claims are only to land. They've already told my chiefs that we have no claims to water, only the land underneath it. So that will be a way that they're going to try and take our water without getting consent from us. And today, I don't believe in that. When they do their trying to consult, they're not consulting. They're just basically following a formality where they send us letters and we respond in their timelines, and they still issue permits. So, okay. Hopefully I can touch everything just in a short time frame, but everybody needs to educate yourself and be well alert of what's going on and educate others. Because if we don't educate others and they keep going within this economic wheel, it's all caving in on itself. Even the medical system is all part of the economic wheel. Everybody knows there's a cure for cancer, but they're not going to put that out there because they're making mega dollars on chemo and radiation and the pharmaceuticals. They just give everybody prescription to Band-Aid rather than heal people. So we know everything is all part of the economic wheel, and until we change that, we're destroying ourselves.
Wow, we received that with heavy hearts. And any of you with questions, please hold them, and we'll invite Christine to come up next. Christine Smith Martin was born and raised in a small northern community of Lax Kwalams, but now resides in Vancouver. While growing up in her community, preservation of food for the winter and living off the land was always a part of her life. This past August 2015, she got word that Patronus was setting up on Lilu Island to begin their work. Work, as she understood it, meant that the sacred area of Flora Bannock was going to be the epicenter of all the work, and her community began to mobilize to stop the destruction of the second largest salmon estuary in Canada. It is now 68 days into the occupation of every single day is a battle to save this estuary. A chief by the name of Smoiget Yahan is a hereditary chief whose land includes Lilu Island.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you see me squinting, it's only because my grandson broke my glasses this morning. So I had to redo my notes a little bit so I can see them. Oh no, that's okay. I wrote it so big now I can see it a mile away. Simgiget lachgiget sigaram khanana aragabawoksik tani gabaku luwal wabum zimgwa li diaxim lach naganach diwayu ganahara getwil gias wil sawatko wab elgam kha doyexim Musqueam for welcoming us, Jimshians, on your territory, and doyexim to the conference organizers and to New Brunswick. As she mentioned, my name is Christine Smith Martin, and I grew up in a small community in Lakhwa Alams, and it was a very tight-knit community. And I went back recently and visited. And lots of things have changed in my community, but lots of things have stayed the same. As I mentioned, on August of 2015, we got word that Patronus was going to come into our community and specifically into the traditional territory of the Gitwil-Gyats. We have 9 allied tribes in Lakhwa Alams. They have specific traditional territories that their responsibility to oversee for their tribe. Very courageous chief by the name of Donnie Wesley. His Smoiget name is Yahan. He decided on that day that he was not going to allow that to happen to his traditional territory, and that his words were When I had my feast, I took on that responsibility to guard my traditional territory. And if I'm not going to do that, then I take off my blanket and pass it on to the next person. So with that courageous man, he's been out there for 68 days, himself, his wife, his children, some of his people from his tribe. And I don't know if many of you know, when Petronas had started negotiating with the BC government and the federal government, they started talking about Liliu Island, and our community, our chief and council got together and went to 3 of our communities where our people are, and we had acquired some money so that we can do our own research into the impacts on our community, and we had our scientists go out and gather our own information. And so when they provided our own information from our own scientists, it was that the destruction that will happen if even that sanctuary is affected a little bit will be catastrophic to not only our salmon, but our neighbor salmon. Northwest Coast is the second biggest salmon estuary in Canada. So when they went over and presented to all of our communities, it was a 100% no, and you've probably seen that in the media. It was like $1 billion. I always think of the little guy that says $1 billion. That's all I kept hearing. But $1 billion was not important to our community. What was important to our community is that is our livelihood. One of the things me and my husband did when we were thinking about, we never think about it in terms of dollars in our freezer. This year we kind of took everything out of our freezer and took a look at it and compared it to what you pick up in Safeway or any of the grocery stores. And we did a calculation of 2 of our freezers because we go every year to preserve our food. And in our 2 freezers was $12,000 worth of seafood for the winter. And so when you put it into perspective, when people talk about, per capita, we're going to get X amount of dollars, well, you can quickly calculate and see how poor we actually will be if we don't have these items in our freezer. So once they went to all the communities, we 100% said no. You would think that the provincial government, the federal government will say, well, let's go back and see why they're saying no, but they didn't. They continued on with their plans. Petronas had no intention of moving off of this Flora Banks. And to us, Flora Banks is a very sacred territory. And it's where the juvenile salmon come in from the fresh water and they go into the salt water. And they stay there for a little while so that they could feed, they can hide from predators. It's a very... when the scientists describe that, and there's scientific description and then there's our elders description, and they're both very similar. And the scientific people said that estuary, you cannot reduplicate it anywhere. And Petronas had said, well, we can just actually pick the eelgrass and put it over here, and then the fish will just automatically swim over there, which is ludicrous. So in our elders, we did a video a while ago of my Uncle Murray, who's a chief as well, and we were out on the boat, and he was telling me all about, he's told me all this my whole life, but he was describing the territory, and so I said, oh, let me see my camera. I'm actually going to record this so other people can have the benefit of it. And he described from a traditional stance why this is so sacred to us. And he talks about it as a transformation. This is where they come and transform so that they can go out to not only us in Canada, but also in Alaska. That this is their main staple. This is where they get the courage to go out into the ocean and to go to the other areas. So, for us, it's a very sacred territory, and that's why we voted no. That was the main reason we voted no. So since he's been on the island, for 68 days, it's been really challenging. I've been out there a couple of times. This last time I brought my daughter, who's 19, with me because I think she's in college, but I think this is more important in terms of taking a couple of days off so that you can understand fully what's happening, because those kids are the ones that are going to take over when we're done. But it was interesting when they had this announcement from the province and they approved all of those permits to go through. Then it became a war. And the war wasn't on our people, the war was against our salmon. They have dropped anchors, cement full of anchors on Flora banks. And this is an area that we don't even like any eelgrass to come loose or anybody to disturb that. We're very protective because we know that that's our stock, not only for us, but all the neighbors that are surrounding us. And so they've dropped anchors, cement anchors. They've now come on to Lilu. They have done some clear cutting in Lilu, which they did not have permits to do. We have culturally modified trees in there that all of our ancestors from hundreds and years back that have made canoes out of. They've chopped down some of these. They've went to we've saved our ground on Flora banks, trying to get them off of Flora banks. They keep doing presentations to like the city of Prince Rupert and Port Edward saying, no, we're not on Flora banks. I think they're just a little bit, they're confused as to where we are. Like, we're going to be confused. We know this territory. We're not confused. It's the people that you brought in from the States that are confused as to where they are. So you can imagine the frustration that we have. There's no DFO officer out there watching all of these eelgrass that come floating after they do the test drilling on Flora banks. There's nobody out there to protect the salmon. There's nobody out there to say, why are you doing this? You're not allowed to do this. This is a very crucial spot. And these big drills have been coming. Since the announcement, they went from 2 big barges to now we have 6 big barges in those areas. So it's been very challenging. Our defenders we call it Lach Ula. That's the name of our territory. And if you Google LAXULAA, I'll have to get the exact, but I'm pretty sure that's it. I'll get it later. But it has all the information on there. And so, our community is at a place where we're trying to figure out ways that we can protect. It's going to be too late if someone doesn't intervene in the next little while. It will have catastrophic. It will be the worst thing to happen to salmon for hundreds of years. It will be catastrophic. So our community is, the warriors that are out there have been really aggressively getting these people off of Flora banks. Like I mentioned, they were doing presentations to all these people saying we're not. We actually have a picture on our website of them dried up on Flora banks. This big barge where they're not doing drilling, dried up on Flora banks. Absolutely devastating. So some of the things that we're now looking at is trying to get more media attention so that we can ensure that we stop this and have some sort of moratorium on any kind of salmon habitat, whether it's a habitat, an estuary, anything where our salmon are. We used to have laws, I think about 10 years ago when our Prime Minister took over, and then all of a sudden started stripping all these laws to protect our salmon. And so now that's why we're out there. If any of us was to even take like an abalone or anything, you can guarantee that they would have a bunch of people out there arresting us. But we've had people out there dropping anchors on this. We've had people, the guys out there drilling when we were trying to get them off Flora banks. We were, telling them to get off of Flora banks. They called a mayday, a false mayday. The police came out, the Coast Guard came out, and nothing was done. And there was no reason to call a mayday, but to try to make it look like we were attacking them. And it was clear that we were not. We were like, why are they calling a mayday? Do they need us to help them? So we have the police and the Port of Prince Rupert who are escorting these people to come do the destruction in our community. Escorting them. So that's what we're having to face up there. And we're down here trying to get more awareness to let everybody know that this is a crisis that's happening. We've sent messages via Twitter and any way that we possibly can to the new Prime Minister. He made some very long commitments in terms of oil. We would like to actually expand it a little bit in terms of these destructive things on our traditional territories when it comes to our salmon. So I really want to also acknowledge Freda. Freda, like we talk, we kind of all get together at these forums and talk about little updates. You see us chitter-chatting up there. It's because, we support each other, and we've learned a lot off of Stoughton Camp. They've come down and provided us the support to start up And we're all in this together. We're going to be looking at gathering everybody up in Prince Rupert sometime this month in November so that we can be united, because that's the worst thing that government would like to see is us united. They want to see us fighting each other, and we refuse to do that. We're sending out SOS to the Prime Minister at Save Our Salmon. So encouraging everybody to get to know a little bit more about this and to really get yourself educated as to what's happening with our salmon. So I'll leave it at that. That's the quickest 15 minutes I have ever talked. But thank you again for inviting us here.
Doing petitions, but petitions haven't really been working. So do you think people should consider other options when doing actions in support?
I always answer that with saying that I don't like to tell people what to do because I don't want CSIS or the government saying that I am leading and telling people what to do. But to me, with anything, whether you're doing business, whether you're managing your home, you be strategic. You make sure you're not breaking the law, and you make sure that if what you're doing is not working, strategize with large number of other people and try to figure out what will work. And sometimes you have to mimic the people that you're battling against. So right now we're battling against the economic wheel. So what do they do when they want to get their projects moved ahead? What do they do to make things happen? They use media, but we can't use the media because they own the general media. So you got to use alternative media, and you got to also use different methods. And the thing that's been working for us is occupying the space. Before, when we were trying to do it from the reserve, we couldn't manage it. But in order to occupy a space, you need infrastructure, you need dwellings for people to live in. And my dad always told me, the only way you're going to win this fight is you have to occupy. So that was what made the decision for me to go move to the territory, because if I'm there, then I can see what's happening. So strategize, use the system that business people use. Decide what's going to work, what didn't work. Don't keep trying to use what doesn't work. Do something different. Get more people educated. The only way people are going to get educated is voices get out there, hand out pamphlets, hold things like this to educate people, and find out other venues, because you're not going to get the business people in here, you're not going to get the other people sitting on the fence in spaces like this, so how are you going to get to them? How are you going to get this message to them? Because everybody needs to be educated. The more people you have on board, the more power, people power.
I think everything that she said is exactly where we're at. We launched a title case with our home community, and what's really important is that in Prince Rupert and Port Edward, and even in our home communities, industry has really worked really hard to divide and conquer. They have picked out some of our smaller chiefs, our house chiefs, and really elevated them and really trying to lure them with dollars. And it's been how we combat that within our own community is really empowering the women, the matriarchs in our community. The matriarchs, actually, if you think about our model, the chiefs aren't above and then the matriarchs is actually the other way around. So really empowering their matriarchs to keep their chiefs in line with what their responsibility is, not necessarily what the dollars are.
My intervention isn't really a question, but I'd like to pick up on what Christine said at the end, that we're all in this together. What Caleb said last night, let's not depend on the indigenous people to lead this fight while we are spectators in it. I think in a nutshell, from Caleb's presentation last night, we're facing death to the world at the hands of the existing institutions that dominate our society. And the indigenous people are representing life and coming up with traditional means of doing that and innovating as well. Alma made the comment that people at the front lines in New Brunswick are coming together in assemblies. I think that's a magnificent idea, and I think that we should come away from this gathering planning for such assemblies locally, regionally, nationally, internationally. The indigenous people of Ecuador and Bolivia have led struggles in those countries to fight these same corporate, resource-driven corporations to a standstill. They are transforming their societies. They have taken on this political sphere. So I think we really need to think of a way to institutionalize the kind of sentiments and gatherings and collective actions we're talking about here on an ongoing basis, and not just leave today feeling boosted or frustrated, but we need to really keep this going.
I have a question here, live from Moncton, New Brunswick, from Ann Pohl, who we heard on the panel last night through the live streaming. She asks, I would like to know more about the police escorting you described. We had the same thing happen to us here in New Brunswick, so it would be good to share information and experiences around that.
Well, we've met with the police a couple of times in Prince Rupert, and they've assured us that their job is to simply be out there to keep the peace. But that's hard to say that when you see them riding between us and the drillers and all of the people that are coming out. So we've always been sitting down. I think Donnie has met with them several times to really hammer to them that their job, actually, if you look back at why the police were really, their part in this piece is not to be escorting these people out. And we've been taking a lot of pictures and a lot of videos, and they've kind of stopped escorting them. They kind of just stop and then let them go out. So I think that's been effective for us, is really making sure that they're accountable, but they're still out there escorting, especially now since the province issued those permits.
I just want to add something to that we had escalation happen and had police doing the exact same thing with our camp, and we ended up having to do legal letters to stop the harassment because they were actually harassing all our visitors, and they had a checkpoint set up at 27 kilometer, and Aboriginal policing tried to get us to sign an agreement with them, and I can't remember what they called that. I don't know if it was an MOU or... Anyways, they drafted up an agreement trying to get us to sign it to keep the peace. But in reading that agreement, one of the clauses said that they were there to keep the peace while the pipelines did their job. So I basically told them, no, we're not signing this agreement. So no agreement was signed, and we ended up having to get a lawyer to write up a letter to the company, to the police, to tell them to stop harassing. And we also went to the BC Liberties Association too and reported where they were taking people's driver's license even though they didn't have a highway infraction. They were trying to say they're enforcing highway laws and out on the logging road, and were stopping people and writing down their driver's license number from going to the back of the vehicle, and they were asking passengers for their names and then come back and intimidating them the next day when they stopped them again and told them their names. So, and they were telling visitors that were from other countries saying that, oh, you have a license plate from somewhere else. If you're going to Hunisatan camp, you can be deported out of Canada and not be allowed back. So that was the tactics the police were doing, and we ended up just going the legal route, and then they backed off after we did the legal letter to them.
My question is both to Christine and Freda, but kind of more directed at Christine because you mentioned so much about salmon and seafood. Right now, the ocean acidification down here in the Salish Sea is such that oysters and other shellfish are no longer reproducing reliably in the wild. And this summer turned out to be a very bad year for salmon because global warming has made the rivers and streams so much warmer that they just many of the salmon just haven't been able to survive. And this is it's a global thing too. So reaching back to what Caleb said last night about not leaving everything to Indigenous communities, how do you feel that people down here hitting hard on the climate crisis and the ocean acidification crisis as a way to stop fossil fuel expansion? Do you feel that that's important and helpful? And also, in what ways can it be harmful to your struggle? Are there problems with that, or potential problems?
Yeah, one of the things we do want to do is also reach out to our brothers and sisters down here, because I'm sure that we're facing the exact same thing that there, it hasn't been a great year back in our home community as well. A lot of our fishermen also said that, and that's what makes it so difficult. I'm always a pessimist when it comes to, I think some of it has to do with climate change. I think some of it has to do with some of the industry, drilling, doing all of these stuff that we have no idea what they're doing. So in the last little while, there has been hardly any fish. Our fishermen came back this year, and they've had a horrible year. And it makes it more difficult for us because we're saying, well, we need to save the salmon, we need to save the fish, and industry's coming in saying, we have a lot of jobs for you guys. We know that you're not getting fish. And the fishing, we even have some of our own people saying the fishing is a dying industry, that we don't need to worry about that. So it's challenging for us. We're getting at it from all directions, and we're dealing with. This is not my area of expertise in terms of biology. Neither is it of our chief that's out there as well. So he's doing he is a fisherman as well. So I think we have a team of scientists in our community. They're actually going to be going out there next week to, see some of the stuff that's been happening and be able to document all of these stuff so that whenever they do reinstate the DFO, hopefully they'll be out there and coming out there. And I think for us, it's a matter of putting pressure on that because they stripped away all of the protection for the salmon. And I think that's why we're seeing such a decrease in the amount of salmon that's coming back. This year, most of our people didn't even get our share of our salmon stock. You were lucky enough to get it during one run. Most of us didn't get it at all. So I think when we get the DFO back, that'll certainly be helpful. We're not relying on them, but in our own communities, it's important that we have our own fisheries, and we do. We have Loch Wallam's fisheries that goes out and tests salmon and tests for the shellfish, and we certainly don't ever want to be at a place where they are down here where they're not reproducing.
Well, for me, I see that if you see the aquatics, the animal life declining, they're usually the first to be impacted because of the environment, because of the lands, then you can be guaranteed we'll be next. So we all should be worried. We should all be questioning the government why they're cutting funding. And I just finished showing her that DFO had signed a MOU with the NEB, so you can see what's happening with DFO and why the salmon aren't being protected, because they're on stream with industry and probably are getting their money from industry to continue running, even though they're not doing as much as they were before. But in order for them to continue in their jobs, they had to get their money somewhere. So my belief is they're also working hand in hand with industry and are allowing the salmon to be put at risk.